Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk Physical Media. I am your host, John, and this is the weekly show where we talk all things in the world of film and, of course, physical media. And we like to start the show off every single week with the news, and this week is no different. And right before I started filming, Criterion announced their November 4K and Blu-ray releases, which makes me really excited. You know, November's heading right into the holiday season, so you expect a pretty big lineup of films from the Criterion Collection, and I don't think they disappointed. Obviously, one we knew that was coming was Seven Samurai. We all heard about the brand new 4K scan, and Criterion has already released this on Blu-ray, and I believe even on DVD. I believe it's actually one of the earlier Criterion releases, and that makes a lot of sense. This is Akira Kurosawa's masterpiece. You know, it's a huge inspiration on so many other films. It's got a United States remake called The Magnificent Seven, so it's a pretty big deal, and this is one I'll probably be upgrading. I have the Blu-ray release. It's not a film that I absolutely love. I can appreciate the movie, but it's not one of my all-time favorite movies. So it's not necessarily one that I'm really excited about, but I do want to see the beautiful new black and white on 4K in this new scan, so I probably will end up grabbing that one on day one, and one I'm definitely grabbing on day one, and I'm surprised by it, but I guess I really shouldn't be, knowing Guillermo del Toro's relationship with the Criterion Collection and how many of his movies have been released through them on Blu-ray and on 4K Blu-ray, and that's because we're going to be getting The Shape of Water. This is the one that won him his Best Picture Academy Award. It really is one of his best movies. I rewatched it earlier this year. I actually have a 4K Blu-ray review of that here on the channel. When this comes out from the Criterion Collection, we'll do a comparison of the previously released 4K Blu-ray and this new Criterion 4K Blu-ray. I'm curious to see what upgrades they make, because the 4K that I reviewed earlier this year is a fantastic 4K Blu-ray, and you know, The Shape of Water's use of blues and greens looks beautiful on 4K, so I'm really curious to see what the upgrade that Criterion is going to be giving us with this. And another one that got announced is Scarface. And no. Not Scarface starring Al Pacino, a 1980s Brian De Palma classic. No, the original one that inspired that Scarface remake. A lot of people might not even realize Scarface is a remake of a classic 1930s gangster film that I'm not really a huge fan of, and I have actually seen it before, because back in the day the DVD used to just come with the 1930s version of Scarface just thrown in there. So of course, me being younger, having a lot more time, I just checked it out. Now my opinion of it at the time, I believe I was like 14 years old. You know, my taste has definitely changed. I might actually appreciate this movie way more than I did back then. I'm sure it still pales in comparison to the 80s version, just because as a huge fan of the Scarface that I know, and the huge inspiration of that movie on so many things, such as Vice City, I, of course, am probably still going to love the Scarface that I know more, but still, I should probably check this one out again eventually, but this one won't be a day one purchase for me. Paper Moon from Peter Bogdanovich is going to be coming to Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray. I'm sure people are excited about that. Funny Girl is going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray. And then another one I'm sure people are really excited about that I'm not the most excited about, only because it's very similar to In the Mood for Love and Wong Kar-wai's Criterion Collection that they have out there. We can get all of his films in this beautiful collection. Godzilla has this beautiful Criterion Collection as well. But we're going to get an upgrade to the original Godzilla, the movie that started it all. We're going to have a 4K Blu-ray of that, and it'll have the original version. It'll also have the Americanized version that came out in, I believe, 1956 packed in there. But are we going to eventually get an entire upgraded version of that Godzilla collection, or are we only going to get this one on 4K Blu-ray? These are the questions that I have. Now, I'm not the biggest Godzilla fan in the world, as many of you guys might know. I said Godzilla Minus One is my favorite of all the Godzilla movies, and I stand by that. I've just never really been the world's biggest Godzilla fan, but this is coming to 4K Blu-ray. It's a classic film, so beloved, started one of the world's biggest franchises. So maybe I do owe this one a purchase. I just don't know if I'll buy it on day one. Although we do have a November Criterion sale, so, this might get included with that. Also, Criterion, celebrating 40 years. They're giving us, a beautiful 40 film collection. Now, this is something I would only recommend to, the real hardcore collectors out there with a more expendable income, where, they can just spend money a little bit more freely and just get this because of the beautiful packaging, because none of the movies that are packed in here are on 4K Blu-ray. They're all on Blu-ray, and that's a little bit disappointing if I'm being honest with you guys, mainly because a lot of these did receive upgrades. But maybe if you're a new collector and you really want to finally get into the boutique label that is the Criterion Collection, you grab this because it does have beautiful box art and all the movies in there, or at least almost all the movies in there, are pretty damn cool. It's just, it's not something I'll be grabbing, but maybe you want to grab that. Who the hell knows? I'm not entirely sure. And that's everything that we got announced from Criterion for November. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about what got announced for November from the Criterion Collection. And that's not all we got announcements for this week. Keanu Lorber is going to be giving us, I believe this is Rian Johnson's debut film, Brick. This is a noir film that also actually stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And, before Rian Johnson started to get shit on for The Last Jedi, and The Last Jedi, not the biggest fan of that movie, I'm not gonna lie. It has some decisions that were made in the Star Wars universe that I don't agree with, but it's still a well-made movie, you can't deny that. Rian Johnson also made Looper, and he's made the 2 Knives Out movies that have come out pretty recently that I feel like kind of turned the wave around on him. Star Wars fans can be a little bit, well, let's just be honest, they can be a little bit mean, so of course they shit on Rian Johnson, but Rian Johnson's still a good director, and Brick is a great movie that I will be grabbing on 4K Blu-ray day one when that one comes out. And then one of my favorite films is going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray, and it's not going to be coming from the Criterion Collection. It's actually going to be coming from Curzon Films. Now, this is a boutique label I have never bought from, but they are going to be releasing Paris, Texas on 4K Blu-ray. Now, I have Paris, Texas on Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection. You guys, if you saw my top 25 favorite movies of all time, if you look at my Letterboxd top 4, Paris, Texas is on there. Love that movie. Wim Wenders, I think that's his masterpiece. I just think that's one of the greatest movies ever made, featuring one of the greatest scenes ever made. So, you know what? I think I'm going to end up grabbing this version on 4K Blu-ray, and maybe I'll upgrade when Criterion eventually releases their version of this on 4K Blu-ray, but still, I don't know if I can wait. It's one of those movies I have to grab day one when it comes out. I believe it's coming out November 4th, but I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me on it, but either way, Paris, Texas, one of those special movies to me. I have to get it on 4K Blu-ray, so that one is one I'm really looking forward to. And then a couple of rumors, none of this is completely confirmed yet, but apparently Gremlins 2 is going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray, and people hated Gremlins 2 back in the day. I never understood that. I've always really enjoyed Gremlins 2. I felt like this is the kind of movie that in 2024 people would love way more than they did back in the 90s. They just wanted more Gremlin stuff, and it was more of a meta movie. You even get Leonard Maltin, who was a film critic who shit on actually the original Gremlins movie. He's in the movie, and, really playing along with all the gags. You get the Hulk Hogan gag in there. It's a very funny, underrated movie, and I really can recommend Gremlins 2. If you just took a pass on it because you thought, everyone says Gremlins 2 sucks, Gremlins 2 does not suck. That definitely is something that's worthy of a 4K Blu-ray release, and I'm really looking forward to that. And then another one that's been rumored, and I've been waiting for this one, and yet somehow it still is rumored to get a 4K Blu-ray release before what I think is one of Steven Spielberg's best films, Minority Report. That one still has no rumor for a 4K Blu-ray, but 2001's AI, Artificial Intelligence, which was directed by Steven Spielberg, but Stanley Kubrick, him and Spielberg really collaborated on this. Steven Spielberg obviously finished it off, but a lot of his original screenplay, a lot of Kubrick's original screenplay is in AI, and I think that's really awesome, and I think the movie itself is really good. Haley Joel Osment is in this. Jude Law, if I remember correctly, is in this. I'm not the world's biggest fan of it, but it actually is a movie that kind of creeps me out a little bit. It's a beautiful looking movie, and it's one that if it is coming to 4K Blu-ray, I'll definitely be grabbing on day one. So that's it as far as the news goes for this week. Let me know in the comments, what are you guys most excited about that was rumored or, is officially coming to Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray, in the next upcoming months, mostly November. We know it's coming out in spooky season, so let me know in the comment section below. And without further ado, let's get into this week's Q&A portion of this week's show, which I absolutely love doing. So thank you guys, everyone who sends in questions every week. I try and answer all of them the best I can. We're going to start it off with a Mr. Smelly Potato question. He asked, when Night of the Hunter came out, critics and audience didn't like that film. Charles Lawton never made another movie. The movie was ahead of its time, and now it's considered one of the greatest films ever. Do you think there are any movies or modern times that failed at the box office with the critics and audience what will be considered a classic by future generations? And yeah, that's the sad thing about Night of the Hunter. That movie, as beloved as it is now, I love that movie. It's a classic film, and it is one of the greatest films ever made, but at the time, it was panned. Sometimes the movie just comes out ahead of its time, and then eventually it finds its audience and might even become beloved. There's so many examples of this, like the original Blade Runner. That one bombed at the box office. The Thing bombed at the box office. A lot of John Carpenter movies really didn't do good at the box office. You would think that John Carpenter would be one of the most beloved directors of all time and was like that from the very beginning. Oh, no, 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 no. John Carpenter was loved for Halloween, but everything that came after that, was pretty much, it didn't do that well with critics and at the box office. That just shows you that as much as film criticism is a good thing, sometimes people don't know exactly how good a movie is. A lot of people kind of follow the wave. So if a movie's getting panned, you'll see other critics pan it as well. Or if a movie's getting beloved, they don't want to go against the grain. They get a little bit afraid. Or, that's why I don't really like it when critics come out and they revise their views on it. It's like, I feel like you're only revising your views because you don't want to be on the wrong side of history when it comes to a certain film. Like, if you hated a movie, you hated a movie. You can't force yourself to love it. But as a good example of this, and to answer your question, Mr. Smelly Potato, our channel director, I have to say, right out of the gate, 2022's Babylon. This is Damien Chazelle's movie. Damien Chazelle, up to this point, was pretty much box office gold. He couldn't miss. First Man wasn't as beloved, starring Ryan Gosling, but still, this is the guy who gave us La La Land and Whiplash, and he was basically a sure thing, so he was allowed to make his epic, his Singing in the Rain. Now, Singing in the Rain has a huge inspiration on this movie, really just showing old Hollywood. You get the stacked cast that features Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt. I love this movie. It's actually my favorite film of 2022. That and Pearl are neck and neck, but Babylon, every time I watch that movie, I'm in awe of it. It looks beautiful. The score is phenomenal. The scenes, there's so many classic scenes. We start out in this great party scene that is one of the most memorable scenes, and it lasts for such a long time. But if you're somebody who's in the filmmaking and just loves the history of making movies and going back to the silent era as we kind of get into the talkies, it's the movie that's made for you. And it didn't do well with critics. Some critics loved it. There's even people who call us like the Babylon Hive, I believe. If you're a fan of like the big picture, the rewatchables, you've probably heard other people who like that movie talk about that. And that's a movie I believe eventually it will find its audience because it's just too damn good to not be as beloved as it should be. So eventually I think people will rediscover Babylon and be like, we were wrong about this one, because it's still my favorite Damien Chazelle movie. And Damien Chazelle made one of my favorite musicals. I don't love musicals, but I fucking love La La Land. And a lot of that also, Emma Stone, my favorite actress. But still, I love Babylon. And that's the shining example, I think, of a movie that will become a classic. But we talked about Blade Runner. Blade Runner had a sequel directed by Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve, he's pretty much seen as gold right now by Warner Brothers with movies like Dune and Dune Part 2. But he made the sequel to Blade Runner 2049. That movie is gorgeous. It's a perfect film in my opinion. It's not as good as the original one, but it's a great follow-up, a great sequel, one of the best legacy sequels you'll ever see. You bring back Harrison Ford, and he's not even phoning it in. He's giving it his all. Ryan Gosling, giving it his all. It just looks gorgeous. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful looking films that you'll ever see. And that's something coming from Denis Villeneuve, who just knows how to make an epic. So those would be my two examples of two movies that eventually, I think Blade Runner, most people agree, shouldn't have bombed at the box office, but I guess that one, it's more of a cult film, and not as many people are going to go out of their way to watch a very sci-fi film. People expect sci-fi action, and you know what? Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, despite the aesthetic of those movies, is definitely more of a straightforward sci-fi movie in tone, and I love it for it, and they are just beautiful to look at, and both movies have beautiful scores. The original one is one of my favorite scores of all time. The sequel, it ain't that bad either. So that was a great question, Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you so much, buddy. And this one, we'll have some fun with this one. This one's from Kevin Kruger, and this might take a little bit of time, so I'm kind of going to bang through this list, but he asks, how would you rank your Criterion 4Ks in your collection? If I'm correct, I got 31 of them, so to get through them all, we're going to go through this pretty damn fast, and we'll start it out with the worst, and this disappoints me because this is actually one of my favorite trilogies of all time, and that's the Three Colors trilogy. The 4K Blu-rays, in my opinion, they ruined the visualization of these movies. The Three Colors trilogies, there was a tint to them. There was a tone to them. And especially with Three Colors Blue, it always just looked a little bit blue. And you took that all out of it. Now all three movies look identical to each other. They, obviously, if you're looking at it from the 4K standpoint, it's sharp. It definitely does look beautiful, but it's not the movies I remember. And this is definitely the example of me being a little bit offended by when you change the color timing of a movie. Whereas other people, I can understand with other movies how they feel. Where for me, I might not get as bothered, but it really bothered me so much with this. This is, I'm telling you, I watch this trilogy every single year. Thank God they include the Blu-rays in here, because the Blu-rays are the way to go, except for maybe Three Colors Red. I'll give Three 3 colors red a little bit of leeway because it is still a good 4K Blu-ray, and that one probably still looks the closest to how I remember it looking. And then second to last, Mean Streets. I still think this is a pretty decent 4K Blu-ray. People were pissed when this came out because they changed the color timing. I just don't think it's the greatest looking movie in general, so you can only do so much with it. I think Criterion gave it their all. Actually, they didn't even do the transfer. I believe it was Studio Canal. Or Studio Canal split the cost with Criterion. I can't remember. It was last year. And this one's only on the list because of the horrible packaging. That's why it's so low. But Trainspotting is still a fantastic movie. The 4K Blu-ray, visually and audio-wise, is good, but damn, this packaging is awful. I can't even figure out how to show it to you guys. It's just awful. Awful packaging. And one that came out pretty recently. Again, it's good, but it's not the greatest 4K Blu-ray I've ever seen. It didn't knock my socks off, and that's David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Good movie. Again, not one of my favorite David Lynch movies, and Blue Velvet, I wanted more from that 4K Blu-ray. And here's another one that it's fine, but it's just not something that's going to knock your socks off. Don't Look Now. Another one, I believe that Studio Canal did the release for the UK and Criterion. So Studio Canal in the UK and Criterion here in the US have clearly a great relationship. The Others. Now, if I remember correctly, this doesn't have any HDR. It's still a great looking film, but it's just not, again, it's just, where we're going down the list, not every 4K Blu-ray is phenomenal. Some are just good, and The Others is just good. And Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, classic of the French New Wave. And this movie, it's really, really good. It's not one of my favorites. I bought this because I wanted to see how this looked on 4K Blu-ray. It's not one of the best looking black and white 4K Blu-rays I've ever seen, but it's still an upgrade from the previous Blu-ray. And, it's the best this movie's ever looked. And actually, a movie that I reviewed really early here on the channel, The Piano. And this movie, it's pretty damn good. Harvey Keitel again. Harvey Keitel, I believe, hangs dong in this movie. And, it also features a great performance from Holly Hunter. She might have actually won an Academy Award for this movie. Off the top of my head, I believe she did. And it's well deserved because it's very different from every other Holly Hunter performance. And Jane Campion really did a phenomenal job directing this movie. Next up, Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides. I love this movie. Kirsten Dunst is great in it. Josh Hartnett is good in this movie. It's just one of those movies that I think, it's got a very dark, James Woods in this movie. It's a very dark movie in general. Just, we're talking about a family of girls who end up killing themselves, and that shouldn't be a very entertaining movie. But Sofia Coppola knows how to direct the hell out of a movie just like her father. And another one of the all-time classics, Night of the Living Dead. This is a movie that me and you can go make a 4K Blu-ray of because it's in the public domain. And you know what? Criterion thankfully gave us a beautiful 4K transfer. And one of the first Criterion 4K Blu-rays, Menace to Society. Just a great movie in general. The 4K Blu-ray is a huge upgrade over the previously released versions, at least from what I can remember. It's a great 4K Blu-ray. I know some people don't like the packaging, and I respect that. I'm not a huge fan of this, but it's actually not as bad in comparison to things like Citizen Kane and Trainspotting. Next up, Devil in the Blue Dress. This is a great Denzel Washington, Don Cheadle movie, a great noir film, and looks beautiful on 4K. Here's a pretty recent one, David Cronenberg's Videodrome. In the UK, they got Arrow Video's 4K Blu-ray of this. I believe it's the same scan. I think Arrow Video actually might have got the better packaging, but it's a really good scan of the movie. It's not really my favorite David Cronenberg movie, but it's still one of his best for sure. Here's one that's really tough to rewatch, but it's a great Martin Scorsese movie, The Best Picture of 1980. Won Robert De Niro an Academy Award, well deserved. And that's Raging Bull, a beautifully shot movie. In the world of cinematography, this is one of the most beautiful looking black and white films. If you're not into black and white films, I understand that, but this is why people choose to shoot a movie in black and white. The only color sequence in this movie is, I believe, a 16mm shot that's supposed to look like home movies. That's the only time you ever see color in this movie. Otherwise, beautiful looking 4K Blu-ray. Here's one that just came out pretty recently. Another great 4K Blu-ray. This one is Risky Business, starring Tom Cruise. This is the movie that really made a star for Tom Cruise. Him dancing in his underwear made Tom Cruise a star, and now he just jumps off of anything. And of course, a classic blaxploitation film, maybe the most famous of all time, Shaft. And luckily for us, we got a great 4K Blu-ray and this purple. Oh my god, love purple, and this stands out on the shelf. And up next is the Carl Franklin directed One False Move. I saw this 4K Blu-ray when it came out last year. I fell in love with this movie, and I fell in love with this beautiful looking 4K Blu-ray. Billy Bob Thornton actually co-wrote this movie. He also stars in it. It's just such a good movie. I don't want to spoil it for you. This is actually a noir movie as well. Carl Franklin is a very underappreciated director. I believe he also directed Devil in the Blue Dress, so the guy's really underappreciated. Another great 4K Blu-ray and just making great use of black and white, and really a huge upgrade is Roaring Twenties. This is a great movie, James Cagney movie. You have to check this one out. The movie that started it all for the Coen brothers, Blood Simple. Reviewed this 4K Blu-ray early in the year, and man, they just had it right out of the gate. Beautiful looking 4K Blu-ray, great audio as well. Here's one that you just go into this because it's one of the best looking movies of all time, and that's The Red Shoes. If you want to see cinematography done at its best, check out The Red Shoes. One that's, this is one that got kind of a funny story. I had just bought the Blu-ray about 2 days before they announced the 4K Blu-ray, but I was able to do a comparison and see if it was a pretty big upgrade. It was Brian De Palma's Blowout starring John Travolta. Quentin Tarantino said he loved Blowout so much, and he thinks that was John Travolta's best performance. That's why he wanted him to be in one of his movies. People think he wanted him to be in Pulp Fiction, but he was really there to talk about him being in From Dusk Till Dawn. Luckily for us, he ended up being Mr. Vincent Vega. Another Martin Scorsese film, After Hours. This was just a cult movie from the 1980s. A lot of people didn't love this movie. Luckily for us, and luckily for us also, we got this Criterion Collection 4K Blu-ray of this, and it really is one of Martin Scorsese's best movies. It's hysterical. It's like Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong, and everything for this guy goes wrong in this movie. Griffin Dunne, poor bastard. Speaking of a movie that doesn't even have any HDR, but because it's one of the best looking movies ever, Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. I've heard people complain about this because it's the green version, or the Shrek version. Either way, I personally love this version. I think this is the best way to watch it. It's a beautiful looking 4K Blu-ray. And again, that's my opinion. I can understand if anyone disagrees. This is one where we were kind of hoping for more to come from this, but either way, or at least we got it. Disney Pixar's WALL-E on 4K Blu-ray. I mean, it's a pretty big upgrade over the 4K Blu-ray that Disney released themselves. But it was, we were seeing Disney team up with the Criterion Collection. This was supposed to be a big deal. We were thrilled. Of course, it was a little bit of a letdown because we didn't get any more movies from them, but you still can't deny that WALL-E is a great Criterion 4K Blu-ray release. I just wanted more from Disney and Pixar, or at least more from Disney. That would be a match made in heaven. One that came out earlier this year, Lone Star. Never saw this movie before I saw it in 4K Blu-ray. Fell in love with the film. This one I said in my review, it's going into my permanent rotation. I've wanted to rewatch this movie. I just don't have the time. But thankfully, this 4K Blu-ray exists. This was a huge recommendation from our buddy 021OM6, Lahain. This came out on my birthday early this year. Love this. This is actually what I think the greatest looking 4K Blu-ray that's shot in black and white that you can ever watch is right here in Lahain. The movie itself was just shot gorgeously, and it just translates so well to the 4K format. Another, this is where 4K Blu-ray just breathed new life into a film that a lot of people probably don't even remember, and that's the Wachowskis' Bound. And this also features Joey Pants. I mean, this movie it's just so good. And it's so underrated. A lot of people, when they think of the Wachowskis, all they think of is The Matrix, despite the fact they also did Speed Racer. And I think they wrote V for Vendetta or produced it. I can't remember exactly. But either way, or the first film they directed, Bound, is a stone cold classic. It looks beautiful. It just showed you they knew how to make a movie. And one of the first 4K Blu-rays from the Criterion Collection was Citizen Kane. Now, this packaging, I won't unfold it now because I don't got all night to roll it back up, but the packaging isn't great, but still. They gave us, I believe, 4 discs in here. Everything you could ever hope for. No stone left unturned, and then, of course, the 4K Blu-ray itself is gorgeous. One of my favorite films from the 1940s. Orson Welles directed the hell out of it and starred in it. And now the top 3. One of them that came out at the end of last year, and it is one of the best-looking movies of all time. Everyone who told me that, they are not wrong. Rico Gomez, Days of Heaven, one of the best looking movies ever, and this 4K Blu-ray does the movie justice. A lot of people said that this was the best looking movie ever. They are probably not wrong, but seeing it for the first time on this 4K Blu-ray, it blew me away. And then at number 2, this came out last year, and it was, I believe, my number 2 4K Blu-ray of last year, and that's Thelma and Louise. Another one where the 4K Blu-ray made me fall in love with the movie all over again. It's now my 3rd favorite Ridley Scott movie, only behind Alien and Blade Runner. I love the score to this movie. I love the soundtrack. I just love this movie. Hans Zimmer did the score to this movie. And then, of course, if you guys have been watching the channel for any amount of time, you know that my favorite biographical film is Malcolm X. And thankfully, on the same day we got WALL-E, we also got Malcolm X on 4K Blu-ray gave me everything I ever could have hoped for from this movie. It's the definitive edition of the Spike Lee joint, Malcolm X, and of course Denzel Washington's best performance, and you won't hear me repeat the same old song and dance about him not winning the Academy Award that year and losing it to Al Pacino in A Scent of a Woman. I won't do it. I won't go into it today. And the next two questions are from our buddy Sprazy110, and he sends in those fast questions that I like to answer. The first one is, what shelves do you use for your collection? And actually, my shelves are custom made. My cousin Matt, who used to do the channel with me, and is supposed to eventually come on an episode of this show, Let's Talk Physical Media. He promised me he would. Him and his father, they built shelves at my cousin Matt's house. They painted them and everything, and they actually brought them over to my house and installed them. So they're custom made shelves. Which really works out good because it saves me a lot of space. I don't know what I'm going to do when these shelves fill up. I think I have 9 total shelves on here that I can fill up, and I've already filled up 7, so I'm running out of space fast, so I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I don't have any room in here for another shelf like this, so I might have to go like with the smaller economy route, off of Amazon. But yeah, I got custom made shelves. Maybe I'll take a picture and show you guys. And the next Sprazy110 question is, how do you decide which movies to watch? Is it just what you're feeling that day, or do you work off a list? So I'm a very routine-based kind of guy. I like to know what I'm doing every single day. That's why I like actually having a schedule. I schedule everything in advance, and I'm one of those people that get a little thrown off when something gets kind of, if something goes wrong, I have a hard time dealing with that. It's just an anxiety issue that I have, so everything kind of has to go perfect to plan for me, or I get thrown off my game a little bit. So for me, I like to follow a schedule, but there are certain times where something will get their teeth in me, or I'll listen to a podcast. A good example of this is I'm a big fan of Ringers, the Rewatchables, and if they're talking about a movie that I love, they did a whole 4-hour breakdown of Pulp Fiction, my second favorite movie of all time. So even though I've seen Pulp Fiction 100 times, I had to rewatch it just because I was in the mood. Same thing this past week, they did an episode on the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is, directed by Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson has a ton of movies released for the Criterion Collection. Almost all of his films. I think only the last 2 haven't been yet. Actually, the last 3 films. Isle of Dogs also hasn't. But either way, I had to watch the Grand Budapest Hotel. Just hearing those guys talk about the movie put me in the mood for it. So I ended up rewatching it, and I love that movie, so it didn't bother me. Those are always the most rewarding, I feel like, is when you're in the mood to watch a movie, and sometimes when you're forced to watch a movie. And that's one thing with this job, reviewing movies. Sometimes I'll have to watch a movie that I'm not necessarily in the mood to watch. But that's fine because I feel like it's more rewarding for me when I'm doing the reviews. So I actually prefer to have something scheduled for me and just knowing what I'm doing, because I don't have to play the game. Like, I'm sure you guys know this, or whether it be streaming or not, going through the carousel or going up and down your shelves and just like, do I want to watch this? Sometimes having too many options is actually a bad thing, because you don't want to waste whatever limited free time you have on something that you probably are not in the mood to watch, but then you end up just rewatching the same thing over and over again because you just like can't think of anything. It drives me nuts, and it happens to me all the time. Anytime I have any free time to actually choose a movie, if I'm not in the mood for something, I'm just like, what do I want to watch? What should I watch? Or I feel like I'm wasting time by not watching something off of my list. But sometimes I have to make sure I'm going to pay attention to certain movies. I owe that, especially if I'm going to review it here on the channel. If I'm not going to review it here on the channel, then you know what? I could just sit there and enjoy it for what it is. But if I'm going to review here on the channel, it absolutely deserves my undivided attention. So that stuff, I always work off a list. That was a great question, Sprazy110. Thank you so much, buddy. And then our last question this week is from Kevin Kruger, and this is a good topic I wanted to talk about this week. Do you think buying movies is a real addiction? I've been addicted to buying movies for the past 20 years plus. Nobody seems to understand it and say, why don't you just stop? It's a waste of money. I've gone to about $15K in debt because of the addiction, and everyone gets angry at me. Well, I would say it's probably an addiction. I mean, it's the similar addiction to anyone who wants to just keep buying things even if they don't have the money for it. And I'm right in that boat with you, man, because you guys have probably heard me talk about like Shop Pay and how that's a lifesaver. Well, I've gotten myself in some pretty bad credit card debt over the years as well. Not just from buying movies, but, I didn't help myself by continuously buying movies when I didn't have the money to buy movies and putting them on credit cards. That's something you should never do. It's something I'm also very guilty of doing. Even now with the channel, there's times where I don't really have too much money and I'll still go out of my way and buy a movie. My wife Faith will get mad at me, but, I do like that sudden rush that you get from buying something. It is an addiction. It's definitely an addiction, and it's something I don't have it as bad as like my cousin Matt. I'll bring him up again. I bring him up all the time, but he really gets bad FOMO, and it's not even just with movies. It's with video games. It's with toys. And he puts himself in incredible amounts of debt that he has a hard time digging out of because he just has to have that stuff. And I'm still guilty of this. Like, this upcoming week, there's not any new movies coming out, like, on 4K Blu-ray that I absolutely had to have day one. So I didn't buy any new movies to review this week. I'm going to review some older stuff that I haven't reviewed yet, because in the next few weeks, I have at least 2 or 3 movies coming out on 4K Blu-ray. So I had to, make some financial decisions, some smart decisions not to, increase that debt. And, you got to be a little bit more responsible. It's very hard. And I understand people telling you, like, oh, you're wasting your money, but you only live once. So, you should be able to buy whatever you want with your money, as long as it's not hurting other people, which that's where the addiction kind of sinks in, where am I hurting other people? Because if, like, just like me, if you're married, if you're spending all of each other's money on something you don't necessarily need, when you need to fix up your house or get something for your dogs, or maybe in your case, kids, that's when things get a little bit bad, and you have to kind of do a little bit of reflecting on yourself. Am I making the right financial decisions? Again, I'm very guilty of making very poor financial decisions, so I'm not somebody to give advice that you should necessarily take, because I'm not necessarily going to follow my own advice. I should, but unfortunately, there will be times where I will make a mistake and buy a movie when I really shouldn't be buying a movie. But anything can be an addiction. Anything that you end up, anything that can end up hurting you or others is not necessarily a good thing. And even that, buying movies can end up being an addiction. And I do believe it truly is an addiction. And, there are so many addictions out there that you might not even realize are an addiction. Like, just drinking caffeine every day, that's an addiction. That's an addiction I 110% have. I need to drink coffee every single day, or I will get headaches, I'll get sick. I won't even make it to noon without having coffee. That's because I'm pretty much a 5-cup-a-day coffee drinker at this point. I've been drinking coffee since I'm 14 years old. I'm 32 years old now. I haven't gone a day since then without drinking coffee or any sort of caffeine. And there's probably no way that I can stop drinking caffeine. So you might not even realize something you're addicted to and it just sneaks up on you. But yeah, collecting movies, that can be an addiction. Anything can be an addiction. But that was a great topic, Kevin, that I really wanted to cover here on the channel. Thank you so much for sending in that question. And thank you to everybody for sending in questions for this week's episode of Let's Talk Physical Media. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. And if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, share this video if you could. We also have channel memberships. We have a Friends of the Channel tier. We have a Producers tier where you'll find Jason Martin and John Doe Juggalo. We also have a Directors tier where you're going to find Frank from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. And just thank you guys all for watching this video. And if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it. We just hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. And then we'll be seeing you around.